Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. My name is Trisha Barker, and I am so excited to talk about lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences with Ines Beyer. And she is the author of Death is Not the End, Understanding the Transition Between Lives, which includes a lot of research and organized thinking about near-death experiences and how this can really help heal us, apply these principles to our lives, and help us in a variety of ways. She also teaches at the Academy of Consciousness, which fascinates me. So thank you for being here with me, Ines.
Thank you, Trisha. Thanks for having me on.
And my first question, I'd really like to start with lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences. And if you could give me a little bit of background about how you got into teaching
Yeah,
people to have these
yeah.
experiences, I'd love it.
Yes, absolutely. I have had spontaneous out-of-body experiences and lucid dreams also, but they're separate things, lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences. But I've had them as a kid spontaneously, like floating around my room or flying out the window and around the neighborhood. But very rare, maybe once in a while, and I thought it was a very a cool experience, but I didn't understand it. And later I started reading up on it much more and reading books about it. And but I didn't really practice it. I was too young until really I found the IAC, the Academy of Consciousness, International Academy of Consciousness, which has different centers all over the world, but they have one here in Culver City, near where I live. And I heard a lecture, and they were talking about how we can use out-of-body, how we can train it, and how we can use out-of-body experiences to explore other dimensions and to experience ourselves as a soul or consciousness outside the body. And since I had read about it and had that, it totally made sense. And that kind of was the time for me to dive in, and I wanted to have more of them, to really produce them more often, more at will, and really take advantage and explore, at that time.
Do you have them pretty frequently? Are you able to, say, once a month have several, or do you go through periods of time?
I have phases. So certainly during the time where I really got into it, I think it was 2008, when I took the training, and then that whole year I practiced almost every night at certain energy work and out-of-body techniques, and I had a lot of them during that period, and I still do, but I'm busy with a lot of other things that I don't practice as often, but I still have them.
Yeah, so my understanding of it comes from Carlos Castaneda, and right after my near-death experience, I looked at my hand as my signal, and I was like, if I see my hand in the dream, I'll have a lucid dream. And I meditated before bed. I also wasn't working, because I was healing, and so I had lots of time to concentrate on creating lucid dreams, and it was easier in that state. Do you encounter people who are able to do it more frequently when they're not as stressed out by life? Is that something you teach at the center, about how to meditate more and get in that?
Definitely. So that happened more for you, as you were recovering and just more resting, and okay.
Yes.
So one thing is that certainly when our body is a little bit weaker, we sometimes say our energetic body or non-physical body or astral body, whatever you want to call it, it's not as closely connected. It has a little bit more room or freedom to roam around, and then it's easier to have lucid experience, spiritual experiences, psychic experiences, and out-of-body experiences. And so definitely, yes, if you have a lot of stuff going on in your life that is very much about physical life, it's harder to have them. It just takes training and practice, and it's possible. But let's say, you're going through a breakup, or you're moving, or you're just very concerned with things here, it's very hard to get your mind to that place, to kind of disconnect from the physical. You have to be able to disconnect from the physical a little bit to connect to the other realms.
And it seems that meditation is a key, definitely a key for me. If I can get to those realms where I'm disconnected, then sometimes if I do that before sleep, it helps. But yeah. What are
Relaxation, just having a peaceful state of mind. Only doing that can already produce it, but then there are other things that can help it, that can optimize it.
So during that phase when you were having a lot of them, did you notice that you were manifesting more in life too? Did you feel like the lucid dreaming helped you in, this reality as well?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first I want to explain the difference between lucid dreaming and out of body,
Yes.
because I feel like sometimes that's not as clear. So the lucid
Yes.
dreaming is when you're still inside your body and you are dreaming, and at some moment in your dream there's some kind of trigger that catches your attention, or sometimes it could be a nightmare or something that is strange, that you feel like, wait a second, something is unusual, that wakes you up. You get like a boost of lucidity, and you get a little bit of lucidity, basically. So then you get control over the dream, to change the dream, to change the scenery, and even to decide what you want to dream. But in a sense, we separate that still from the outer body, because you're still inside the astral body is still located inside the body, and there's still dreaming happening here. When in the outer body experience, by the way, a lucid dream is very close to getting out of body. So if you have a lot of lucid dreams, it definitely is a springboard. It'll help you to have out of body experiences. So then out of body experience, where your non-physical body actually disconnects, and there are real sensations of disconnections, like vibrations, or like a buzzing, or like a pull outside the body. You don't have that every time you have an out-of-body experience, but these are more common with out-of-body experiences. And you actually move away from the body to a distant location. You interact with in the other dimensions, or in the physical.
So here's an interesting thought, and I wonder if you've encountered anyone who's done this in a lucid dream. So, say when I was doing it, I'd see my hand and I'd go, okay, that's my trigger, and now I can create whatever I want. But there are other times I just got a little bit of lucidity, and then I might go see someone that I know. I entered someone else's dream, and it was their dream. And they remembered that I was there, and they didn't understand why I was there. Like, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Just that,
Yeah, actually, that to me sounds almost a little bit more like an out of body experience, because
really,
you can have joint out of body experiences. And then, yes, if two people meet outside the body, they can have the same memory of an experience. But a dream would be something that your brain makes up. So
right.
I think it's just that we have a tendency to, whatever happens at night, we just call everything a dream. But there are different levels of altered states, of awareness, of sleep, and also out of body, our awareness fluctuates. It's not like here we're awake and we're kind of functioning all day, but when we're out there, we don't have the stability of the physical body, so our awareness can be reduced, or we can be unconscious, or we can have lucidity, and it's a little bit more tricky to control that also in that state. So what we teach a lot is energy techniques, moving your energies up and down, inducing what we call a vibrational state. And that usually helps to disconnect from the denser energies, and to be more within yourself, and to raise up your lucidity.
Interesting. So what are some of the breakthroughs that people have made by learning to do this? Have you witnessed it in people's lives where they've really changed because they've learned how to lucid dream or have out-of-body experiences?
People use it for different kind of reasons. But it's always exciting if somebody has never had one and they just kind of wanted to have that experience, and then they do, and then they write us an email or they call us and say, oh, it happened last night. I tried this technique, from the class, and this happened. And just, even if it might be a very simple experience, but just being lucid outside the body, and having that realization, that confirmation is important. But some people use it to connect with loved ones that have passed away, that they want to see if they're okay, and some want to explore, just explore the spiritual dimensions, and some want to communicate with their helpers or guides or mentors, or I think you call them angel beings or tall angel beings. There are all kinds of those. We call them mentors or helpers, but they usually have more existential energies, and they want to help us, guide us, and sometimes take us even on a tour outside the body. So yeah, people have the most interesting experiences, and they do it for many different reasons. Some just like to do it for fun, which is okay too.
Right, right. Because it is kind of fun to be able to control a dream. It's exciting.
Yeah. It's freedom. It's just such a freedom, like to be out of the limits of the physical body. I mean, you have experienced that in a way. It has a different quality for sure.
Yeah. So I have just one last question about that, then we'll move into some of the topics in your book. But if for someone who's never had a lucid dream and is curious about how to even begin, would you say to start meditating and setting that intention? Like that would be the first step?
Definitely the intention. Yes, having the intention, first of all. Just by going to bed at night, normally we just go to shut down. We don't want to be aware of anything, but just kind of making that switch to wanting to be aware at night, and to kind of separating ourselves a little bit from the body in a way that you're kind of there and you try to observe your body falling asleep, and your consciousness doesn't have to go to sleep. We're so identified with our body that we think if my body falls asleep, I'm asleep, but we can actually separate the two. Our consciousness can be awake, our body can be asleep. And kind of trying to observe our body falling asleep and trying to extend that period of maybe that in-between phase of being awake and asleep, and extend that more and more. And that's usually where a lot of things happen. So the intention, and also what helps is writing down experiences that happened at night. So for example, in the morning you wake up and you think about what happened last night. And this is just more of a conditioning for our brain, for ourselves. The more we make that regular practice, the more we go already to bed at night, like, okay, I'm going to have an experience, I'm going to write it down in the morning. And then the more awareness we have during those states. So even if nothing happens, just write down nothing happened, or I had a dream, or whatever it was, and you'll see it improves.
Interesting. Very cool. So one quick thing about out-of-body experiences, and maybe you've met people like this. I had a lot of spontaneous ones that were kind of trauma-induced. So one of them was, I was still in my body cast, and the grocery cart hit another cart, and this reminded me of being in a stretcher in the hospital, and so I was just out, of my body for a minute. And so those aren't really exciting out-of-body experiences. No. Do you guys have tips for people who, because of trauma, kind of fly out of their body for a moment?
That actually is, it's kind of an escape mechanism that happens sometimes, unfortunately, in traumatic experiences, or sometimes at birth, or in severe pain, or rape, unfortunately, that people have. They just pop out of the body. I don't know if I would have a suggestion. I mean, I would just say it's okay to be out of the body, and that as long as your body is okay, or if you're in an accident, I'd rather want to be popped out and see the accident happen without not being in it, not being in my body, but observing it from the state out of body, than being in it. So I think it's a good mechanism. I don't know if I would change it. Yeah. But certainly we do want to more encourage people to do it in a healthy way, and just practice like meditation, or like practice energy exercises, to just do it in a safe way while their body is sleeping at night, or during where they would normally take a nap, have a period where they try to practice OBE, and it can be very safe and not traumatic at all.
Yeah, that reminds me of an ER physician who told me, and this is regarding someone else, but he's like, nature is kind. And a lot of times the spirit starts leaving, during great
Yes.
pain, which makes a lot of sense when
Yeah.
people are dying or in trauma. That
Yes. Yeah.
happens.
And I had always a lot of fear about, well, I'm not afraid of dying because I already had a belief in reincarnation and some ideas about it. I read a lot of books, but I had always had this fear of pain, like what if I'm in an accident? I just don't want to feel that. So that kind of actually encouraged me to read near-death experiences of people who were in accidents, and then most of them say they just pop right up right before, and they never feel the impact. So that gave me comfort. So that was one of the reasons of studying NDEs.
Yeah, and I think just intuitively, I know having had a near death experience, I was talking about how I was on a plane many years ago and it lost both engines. And this is after my near death
Oh,
experience. And we're going down, and I was comforting the people on both sides of me, saying, hey, we're if we hit the ground, we're probably going to be out of our bodies before we hit the ground, and we'll just be with the light, nothing to worry about, and they were kind of looking at me like, my kids, my life, like
oh.
freaking out. And I was like, we're going to be fine, we're going to be fine.
Yes,
Like I was just,
that's so good to have
that was my
to help us.
certainty, about what would happen in an accident like that it would most likely people
Yeah,
leave before. But
yeah. I
interesting.
just got goosebumps, so I'm
Cool. So I would like to hear about your research for your book, Death is Not the
Mhm.
End. So how did you, like, how many years did it take, and what did you start studying and doing to compile all of the research and
Yes.
information?
So I wrote the book in 2012. It was published in 2016, but I wrote it in 2012. And I think writing it was relatively easy. It just kind of poured out of me. I had already read a lot. Maybe I would have to go back to what all the stuff that happened before. Um, but what happened before was that I went through like a crisis, like a health crisis, and I was faced with potentially dying and with my own death. And so I was reading about near death experiences. I was studying after death communication and out of body experiences too. And so I had some of that knowledge. And then at some point, actually, it was in the class that we talked about death and the death process and how there are kind of three stages of death, not just a physical death, which happens to the physical body, but there are two more stages that can happen after, and how they happen, why they happen. And that was very fascinating. And it had a lot to do with the attachments we have to our old life and to our body, how well we are able to move on in the afterlife, or in the other dimensions, and move on to the next life, and also how much awareness we have there. And then when I thought about that, I thought, well, going through my crisis, I wish I had all this information. It would have really helped me. So then that's when the idea was born to write a book about it. And I had the OBE, the out of body experience through the volunteering and the teaching, and then my interest in near death experiences and after death communications just
And
came very easy.
yeah, that fascinates me. Something you said about the crisis and how that
Mm-hmm.
brought you to near death experiences. I wonder how many people out there have experienced the same thing, have had a
Yeah.
crisis in their life, whether it's their own health crisis
Yeah.
or the loss of a loved one. But there's something about the near death experience that comforts people and informs
Mm-hmm.
them of a different way of being. And I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what did it do? Was it just reading about them that gave you this certainty? Was it, as Ken Ring says, it's like a benign virus? As near-death experiencers start talking about their experiences, others start picking up on them on an energetic and spiritual wavelength. Was it
Yes.
something like that?
It's definitely energetic, and I always felt like it's a very high vibration. Or just going to the conference, I mean, you've been there, it just hearing the people speak, it seems very they're usually very open and very warm, and it's more about love and about acceptance, and they're not so much like everybody has to be like this or you have to do this. It's very open, and I'm already drawn to that. But also when I read about the NDEs or watch these stories, it just always resonates. And having been outside the body, it just totally makes sense. I mean, I have had this vision where you see the colors very crisp and clear, and the flying through walls and things like that. So it's like, yeah, it's not a belief where I don't have to believe in it. It's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you're at that point, a lot of near-death experiencers say that they're not believers, they just know God and they just know the other realm. And that's what that kind of experience does for you, is it's no longer a belief, it's a spiritual reality. It was a spiritual reality the minute I stepped into it. And it sounds like your OBEs gave that to you too,
Yes.
that this was a spiritual reality.
Yes. They're not always spiritual. They're not as big or intense as a near-death experience, because there's no death situation. There's no question about going back or not. They're usually more innocent and sometimes just simple or fun. But what was I trying to say? But yes, just having that experience, I am not my body. I am a consciousness that my body can be there sleeping, and I can be up here on the ceiling, looking at my body sleeping. Just that alone already can change you.
Yeah. So there's a section in your book that you wrote about the time between lives, and a lot of people speculate on this. What was some of the research and what were your findings about that time when you're choosing maybe your soul plan or your soul mission, or that moment in between?
Yes. So the period between lives is, I combined it from my knowledge, again, from the out-of-body experience and our research in the different dimensions, and from people having traveled to the dimensions and communicated with people who are between lives while being there, but also from research of Dr. Michael Newton, who did hypnotherapy, regressing people to the periods between lives. And he is very specific, I ask very good questions. So just reading that gives you a really good idea about what happens there. And whatever he found matched up with the people who had out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. So from what we understand is that there are different kinds of dimensions. There are also some that are, you could say, lower. They're not really lower or higher or whatever, but there are some where the energies are more physical, more related to Earth, and then there are some that are more different from Earth. And so in these dimensions, we end up going to a place, or we call it like our home dimension, which resonates with who we are. And let's say there are thousands of dimensions, we will kind of match up with the one that resonates with us. So if I don't know, haven't been a criminal or a terrorist, there are certain places I won't even necessarily go. I'll just skip those and be at another plane, but we can still access those. And from there, we kind of reflect on our lives before, and eventually prepare for our next life.
So that sounds like, I talked with my father in the afterlife. He's passed on, and his life review seemed way more extensive than the near-death experience one, which is really just, giving you a few pointers on how to be.
Showing you that, or?
Yeah. So I saw that, his whole life opened up, and he could look at every choice and how it would have affected everything.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, just thinking about that, what every thought, every action, every choice means, really.
Yeah.
Not a lot of us get to see that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's kind of a heavy responsibility, but it doesn't feel heavy to him in that spirit form. I can tell he's just kind of observing it, like, okay, this is what my soul had the opportunity to choose and do. This is what I did. This is maybe in the next life how I'll be a little wiser, in certain options. So he definitely wants to reincarnate, like I feel that,
Mm-hmm.
with his spirit. And it's interesting. Maybe it's an extended period of time to them there where they really take some time to analyze
Mm-hmm.
their mission, and
Yeah.
maybe who knows? I mean, but it
They,
sounds
they
like
do, and also their time can be a little bit different from what we think here, linear time. So somebody being 70 years in the physical body is different than somebody being 70 years between lives. It has a whole different feel. There's also dimensions where there's no time, and things merge. And certainly I don't know exactly how everything works, but just from my understanding from the research that I had done, I kind of described about the dimensions, how they're set up, and what souls or consciousnesses do between lives and how they prepare, and also what sometimes could be a regret, or yeah, maybe in a way talking about the life plan, whether or not they kind of fulfill. That's a big topic in the near death experiences too, that people come back, they feel like they still have something to do. And I also found that a lot of people have made some kind of plans before coming here, and it's very easy for us to get distracted, to get in the hamster wheel of life and worrying about our day-to-day things, and we forget there's something more besides working and paying our bills and all of that. And that, and then the life plan doesn't necessarily have to be like a huge big mission, but it can be something like becoming a little bit more patient, or somebody caring for an elderly parent, or that changes them in some kind of way. So it's not always like a work necessarily.
yeah, like from my own life review, one thing that I saw was to look into the hearts of other people, but also not to judge them, to go like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, people have these deep internal lives, and who knows the beauty that goes on with someone in someone's life. So why not extend grace to every person and see, what they're about. So sometimes the lesson is simply just that simple, like connect with other people and be
Mm-hmm.
open-hearted, and look for the good in others. And that's a simple way to look at it, but it seemed to be a message from the afterlife.
Yeah, and understand, it's very hard for us to do, very hard for me to do too, but to just kind of see, like, there's always a reason why people act a certain way. And um, sometimes in NDE you can kind of see the butterfly effect a little bit more, like they're like this because of the parents who were like this, and we don't always see that, and we tend to judge, and you know and I still do that sometimes. I mean, we're not perfect. It's hard to look inside people and really see them for who they are, but it certainly helps to just have an understanding that this is this shell is, or this body is, it's just one of many, and we've had many different bodies and many different lives. We have been tall, short, poor, rich, ugly, pretty, Asian, black, all kinds of races and religions, and followed many gods. And that's something that comes through near-death experiences or through out-of-body experiences, because we kind of get a glimpse into the back history of our soul, of our astral, non-physical body that has been doing these incarnations. And then that kind of levels everything a little bit more to, okay, it's just one life, one body, one experience. It's not the be all end all, or it's not like, being a German is better than being an American, for example. It's like we have this tendency to take everything very personal and very attached to our bodies, even, or to our sex, or so many
It's
crimes in the world are just men still in the mindset that they can, have power over women, for example. So it would be good for them to have more bodies.
Yeah, yeah.
They,
You
they might
always
see that they were the woman with 5 kids in their past lives, and they might treat their wives better.
right, right. It is interesting that genderless feeling and that, that total disconnect from everything that we are. And certainly traveling to other countries can help people expand their minds about, well, that's just culture that shaped that thinking, or that's just, environment. But there's nothing like an OBE or an NDE to totally disconnect from all that and go like, I am my spirit, that's who I am. And this body, this thing that I have to be shoved back into is really just a vehicle that's
Yeah.
carrying my consciousness. And yes, we have to love ourselves and treat ourselves well, and that's how we access more love for others. But it's still an interesting and weird phenomenon to know that spiritual reality and then be back in this
Yeah.
body.
Because in here we have the biology, we have the fears that come from our evolutionary biology, our instincts and genes and all of that. Sometimes we say actually being born is more of a shock to the soul or to the consciousness, because you're being restricted from a more free state into a more restricted, into the body of a baby, which doesn't even have awareness yet, still has to grow up to be a full person, have a full brain to take in all this reality. Where over there it's all natural, and then so it can feel restricting, and sometimes you, especially if you're in pain, you might just want to go out and leave. But the idea is not to take it to escape life, but to have it enhance the life that you have.
Yeah, I remember when you're talking about babies, about a year after my near-death experience, I walked into a hospital and it was the nursing ward or the infant ward, and they had huge pictures of babies on the wall. And I stopped and looked in their eyes and I was like, oh my God, you were just there. And I could see
Yeah.
it. They were just there and they were in shock and they were delighted and there were many things at one time. It was very cute.
And isn't it funny? Sometimes you can look at a baby and you can almost see in their face, like, what is this? Almost just kind of look like, oh my gosh.
I did it again. Here I am. Yeah. So back to some of the topics in your book. What fascinated you most about near-death experiences? So how did you organize the material and what did you focus on?
I wanted to really let people know what's out there, that there is good research. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the book, is to, I can talk about my experiences but what I found is that, people say, well, nobody knows what happens after death, but we have great studies done by doctors, done by scientists, and of course, you cannot prove everything scientifically because some of the things are happening in non-physical reality, so it's very hard to have hard evidence for it. But there are great studies done, like Dr. Pinvan Lamo, Eben Alexander, Bruce Grayson, and after death communications, and any different kind of fields that you look into, past life memories. Ian Stevenson, who studied children remembering their past lives. And so I found that, there is a lot of information. How come nobody knows about that? Or to me, it felt like not a lot of people knew about it. They might have believed in an afterlife, or maybe because that's part of their religion, that something happens, there's a heaven, but it's more like a belief. It's not like there's actually studies. So the purpose was for me more to bring as much as the studies into the book. And so I touch on the different after-death communications, near-death experiences, and what I found most interesting, and what I think would help people.
What did you think was like one of the most profound and powerful pieces of scientific evidence? So if you are categorizing things from different people, what do you think like, well, if people just knew this, they surely would be convinced that
Yes. Definitely Ian Stevenson. I mean, the studying the children who remember their past lives, but also then that they have carryover scars or birthmarks that match the death records of the previous personality in those cases where they are able to track it and investigate and find this other personality. And they could say names and name the family and toys and things like that. And that to me was like, wow, I mean, even though he says it's not evidence, but it's very, very interesting. I mean, some of the information, how could they know that? Dr. Pim van Lammel's book, Consciousness Beyond Consciousness or something like that. And it's very, very technical, but it's very well done.
oh yeah,
And he goes through it, and all the arguments you get, well, it's a hallucination, it's a lack of oxygen, he discredits them all and with hard science. So that was
I agree. He's wonderful. He's the real deal. And he brings so much information in credible ways that can't be denied. And so I do direct people to his work. And that's important because you don't want people to veer off down paths. If they're going to talk about science, they need to remain, in that realm and stick to it. The science actually doesn't interest me as much because I'm a knower. I don't need to believe or have it proved to me. And I'm way more interested in the experience, the energy, the personal development and the personal healing that can come from people who have had these experiences and offer guidance or healing through the work of their guides and angels. I think that that's just needed on this planet.
It's definitely needed. And, we don't need to convince anybody that it's real. I mean, nobody's trying to convince anybody, but it helps, it helps to have, for some people who are more thinkers or who want to read the studies or see what has been done, they might gravitate more to that information. And I'm a little bit like you. To me, it makes sense, and I'm more about what can we do with this and what does that actually mean, right?
Yeah. To the suffering in the world, really, because I mean, I've suffered, you've suffered, everyone has suffered in one way or another. And it's that spiritual realm that offers this great peace and this great love and this great freedom. And I feel this like need to give that to people, like, okay, if there's any, mission that I have, it's okay, there is relief, there is healing, there is connection, and it's from that place of the divine.
Yeah. And it's probably very more easy for you because you've kind of been immersed in that energy and that state, and you might not be able to access it all the time, but you can kind of remember what that's like and connect to it and bring it to people more. And that's kind of what we need all over the world.
And what I've found, though, is, in times of deep grief, loss, or trauma, or, even breakups, these kind of things, you can lose the light for a while. It can literally be just cut off from even someone, who has a knowing of it. Your own depression or your own pain can be so great that it's hard to connect. So I think part of the reason why near-death experiencers do have depression or do have those moments is so that we can understand, like, okay, it happens. Sometimes it takes over, and we're human and we're broken in certain moments, but there still is always a way. There's the walking back toward that healing, which is meditating, praying, opening to that, being in nature, being around kind people, and really developing that connection again, and that it can happen again, kind of like the intention.
And you feel more. I mean, they say that near-death experiencers, they just feel deeper. They can feel energies more. They can feel feelings of other people more. They're more empathic. And so then pain also is stronger, right? Not just the good feelings, but the pain too, and also you see the gap. You see more of the gap from the reality that we have here and what could be or what's there, and it's like we want to just like, why can't I be a little bit more like that? And there's just still a few people trying to make that happen, and hopefully we'll have more.
I love that topic, that bringing heaven to earth, and
Yes.
that idea of what is possible. What are some of your dreams or hopes about bringing that energy to earth? How would you see that people might be?
I always find that it starts with me. Just with me, my own relationship, just being more loving, or in my day-to-day, just finding a way to just be more peaceful, more kind, more loving in just between me and the people around me. And then if more people can do that on their own level, then that'll affect everyone. So I don't try so much to take on the whole world, but I really see, like, because I struggle with that on my own, and it's like, well, it's tough some days, or you just have bad thoughts, and you don't see the light, like you said, to remember that. And so for me, it always helps then hearing these near-death experience stories, because it takes you out of the personal, the small self, and it takes you to the bigger overall picture. And I like looking at the bigger overall picture, that whatever's happening has some kind of meaning or purpose, and we'll get through it, and in the end all is okay, or we just don't know where that leads to. We only find that out looking back. But seeing things in a greater perspective has helped me.
Yeah, you're definitely right about the micro and the macro, the small and then the universal connection, because every little thing that we do matters. The thoughts we think about ourselves and in our heads affect our bodies, and the way we treat others around us, like creating that heaven just within our own space and in our own lives is important. But then on that other level of just that release, I found that there's so much healing in meditation. Sometimes I've been taken to these healing rooms and felt this incredible power where there really are guides and benevolent beings there who want to help me on this journey, and they want to help you, and they want to help everyone. And it's just amazing that they exist, and we only have to take the time, to connect with them. And so that gives great joy, being very, very disconnected, but then also being very conscious and present of one's life.
And that reminds me of when you were saying in one of your videos that you saw the guides working through the surgeons or through the doctors, and through their wise energy, or they maybe had a more specific knowledge that could help energetically. And I think that happens a lot, and I also think that we can do that. So for example, when you connect in that meditation to that state, that peaceful, loving state, and then you kind of send the energy out, even just in your own space. But let's say you're on the bus, or you're at work, and you just send a little bit out of that good energy, you're kind of contributing with that. It's not visible, but it can be felt.
Yes, I totally believe that that's part of the light workers' mission too, is just on an energetic level in their towns and their apartments and their spaces. That sending of that actual energy is part of the healing. I have a question that maybe this will be one of the final questions, but if you encountered someone who was going through a health crisis like you went through, or was just confused and didn't know what to think about the afterlife, or was agnostic, what's the main thing that you would want to tell them?
What I found I thought about this because you asked me what helped me in my crisis. And, my crisis was just a mess. I mean, it was just, nothing I tried really helped until I got to that moment of surrender. And it was really just a choice or a moment where I said, you know what, I can't do anything. I can't predict the future. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I just have to surrender to and be okay and let go. And even if I die, it's okay. And if I live, that's great. Of course, I was hoping for that, but to kind of even let go of that outcome and get to this space of surrender, and then you can, it's almost like you find a space of peace. And from my experience, I don't know if that is everybody's experience, but after that, everything changed to the positive. I mean, I had a good outcome. I survived. But also, it was almost like a test. And then afterwards, I found the group where I ended up volunteering. A lot of great people. I found a lot of interesting teachers and mentors, and everything kind of fell into place right after that. So what I would recommend is to try to get to this place of surrender where you can just be okay with whatever the outcome is, as much as it may suck to do that.
Yeah, that reminds me a little bit of Anita Moorjani.
That can even cause healing to happen.
Yeah, that reminds me some of what Anita Moorjani says too, that it doesn't sometimes matter the treatment. So a lot of people contact her because she had cancer, and she says, well, some people go the natural route, some people go a medical route, but you have to have peace with the route that you're choosing. You have to know, what, this is right for me right now. It feels right. My body's responding right to it, that I feel good about it. And that's that she said that when you're in that place, then it's a better outcome. But there's also some peace with it too of, well, no one really knows, if near-death experiencers like Mary Neal are kept underwater for 30 minutes and survive, it just was not her time, and so on some level, it's not our time sometimes.
And at some level, maybe it doesn't even matter the treatment so much, but you just have to find, like you said, find what feels right to you, and you'll be guided. I definitely found that I've been guided to books, to certain things that help me, and to listen to that and always weigh different options. I was very black and white at the time, like it's either this or that. But what I found is it doesn't have to be this like Western medicine or alternative, but you can do both, or you can do a combination, and that's okay, as long as you feel like, okay, I can go with this, I can be okay with that. And then there will still be fears, but then at least you have some peace of mind, and listen to yourself, right? Because there are people going to give you 100 suggestions, all kinds of things to do, but you just have to feel right with it.
Well, I think going through a health crisis at a young age makes you wiser, and in certain ways, just like having an NDE at a younger age, just adds a different perspective on the life process. Because most people are in denial of death for so long, and then they're busy and they're raising kids and they're doing this, and they stay in denial. And then there's a little bit of the process that the stages. You could look at all of life as the stages of grief, because then there's acceptance. And when you're faced with a health crisis or a near-death experience, you jump straight to acceptance eventually, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna die someday, and you're okay with it, and you're like, because I'm gonna love every minute that I have, and I'm going to enjoy this and make this meaningful in various ways.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately that happens to a lot of people, that something has to happen, like somebody in the family gets cancer or dies, or they get a diagnosis themselves, or something tragic happens. It's like a wake-up call, and it's like, wait a minute, it's not certain that we're around tomorrow, and what am I doing? What am I doing every day? And what do I want to do? What can I do? And start to ask more of those questions. So unfortunately, that happened for me in that way, and it seems to happen quite a bit this way.
Yeah. I have one final question, then we'll end this. So, certainly the lucid dreaming and out of body experiences have been very healing and informative for you. Is there anything else that you were drawn to as far as healing modalities or anything in the spiritual community that really brought you a lot of comfort?
Um, Healing, oh my God, I tried so many different things that helped at some certain point. Like theta healing helped me to get through my fears. I don't use it anymore, but I used it at the time. I like hypnotherapy, and but I really enjoy David Hawkins's book. He has a book called Let Go, which just has a little bit of psychology in it, but he walks you through all the emotion. But it's very, to me, also a very high vibration kind of book, which helped me a lot. And so for me, it's more about healing from not so much with diet or I mean, I do all those things. I do yoga and keep my body healthy, but I think it has a lot to do with our mind and our state of mind, and to getting to that place where you just don't get triggered as much, and you can stay centered and keep more calm, and sometimes disconnected, don't take things so personal. And so that's what I'm trying to learn, and I feel like that's just going to help in every area of life. With the body is going to benefit from it, and people around us going to benefit from that.
Wonderful. That's wonderful advice. I might provide some of the links below to those videos and your book and your website as well. But thank you for talking
Thank
with
you,
me.
Tricia.
And may you be blessed, everyone who's watching. And please also check out, there's an intuition class with Daniel Guro and his wife, Sylvie Guro, and they are teaching people to open more to their intuition. They're both Reiki healers. But thank you so much. And
Wonderful. Thank you, Tricia.
may you be blessed.